a sacred space where creation takes place, and that living within this sacred space changes one's relationship to all of nature and to the universe. The brain has an ego that sees itself separate from the reality and also sees itself as the most important part of the reality. But within the heart, one is not separate from the reality, but becomes one with the reality. There is no separation, and all parts are equal. The Mayans speak about this constantly, how no human being is greater than any others, that we are all the same. So as you can see, words may describe what we are talking about, but you cannot taste this other way without entering into the sacred space of the heart and feeling and becoming one with this vibration. This is something where we will have to discuss at another time. Perhaps the best way to show you the heart of the Mayan people is to continue with the story. Now we are going to move into the jungles of Guatemala. In June of 2007, I turned over my manuscript for The Serpent of Light over to my publisher, Wiser Publishing. There were many stories of the ceremonies of the Mayan people and other tribes as the interior energies of the earth were altered. In July of 2007, as I said before, Don Alejandro and his wife came to Sedona and asked for a meeting. After Don Alejandro spoke about the pole shift, he also told me that very soon, according to the Mayan calendar at that time, the world was going to enter into the end of time, and certain ceremonies must take place in preparation, and that these ceremonies were marked in the Mayan calendar. This is before the blue sphere ever even appeared. Don Alejandro then began to speak about the Spanish conquistadors and how they had destroyed almost all of the Mayan artifacts and records. And in so doing, the Mayan lost much of their knowledge and their prophecy and their wisdom. But then Don Alejandro spoke of how secret documents were hidden from the conquistadors and that the time had now come to rebuild this knowledge. He then said that according to the Mayan prophecy, the Mayan had to, at this time, begin to reconstruct their knowledge, their experience, and wisdom and memories, and that this was the time that this had to be initiated, and that during this time, the world would be watching. Don Alejandro said that the Mayan Council saw this as a group of people coming from all the continents and a vast number of countries around the world, and this group would represent the world. He asked me to find these people, exactly 60 of them, and gather them together in Guatemala City on a specific day in November of that year, 2007. From there, he and the Mayan Council would take them into the jungles of Guatemala to watch the Mayan Council begin to bring their knowledge together again, and also to perform ceremony with this world group. Well, this was easy for me. It took about 60 phone calls, and it was done. They came from 23 countries. In this invited group was Grandfather Eric from the Hopi tribe and 3 elders from the Sierra Nevada, Santa Marta of Colombia, South America. One was a Kogi Mamos, and the other was an Arahuacos Mamos and his brother. These 2 tribes are significant because of the ancient past. Don Alejandro told me that the Maya were originally from Atlantis. I had known this for years, but it was pretty powerful to hear this from his words. And so let's revisit Atlantis for a quick moment to take a look and to see why these other 3 tribes, the Hopi, the Kogi, and the Arahuacos, were so important. Atlantis was a country that was symbolized by 3 rings, one ring inside of the other. The outer ring or sphere, and it could also be seen as 3 spheres. That's another way that Atlantis saw themselves. The outer ring or sphere stood for the people who lived in Atlantis. The middle ring or sphere stood for the priesthood, and they were called Maya. The priesthood were the bridge between the people and the center ring or sphere, who were called the Nakals. It was spelt N-A-K-K-A-L-S and sometimes spelt N-A-C-C-A-L-L-S. The Nakals were the ones who were speaking directly from their sacred space of their hearts and connected directly with the spirit of Mother Earth and beyond. They lived in caves and in special rooms within the pyramids, and they glowed in the dark, and they floated about a few inches off the ground. The Hopi were Maya, and the Maya are Maya, and the Kogi and the Arhuacos Mamos were and are the Nacals, which also include the Wiwas and the Caguamos tribes in Colombia. When Atlantis sank 13,000 years ago, because of the physical pole shift we just mentioned, the Maya jumped into their boats and rowed to the Yucatan, not far from where the southwest area of Atlantis existed. And the Nacals rowed in their boats to where Santa Marta, Colombia is now, or at least not far from there. All these tribes are all related, and all of these tribes remember what happened. Not only 13,000 years ago, all these tribes remember 26,000 years ago, and even much longer. But this would be the first time since Atlantis sank that all three of these tribes would be together and perform ceremony. It was historical. Even further, according to Grandfather Eric, he was the first Hopi to ever return to Guatemala since they left Guatemala thousands of years ago to head north to the Four Corners area, which we talked about before. The Mayan Council of Elders began by leading us to Lake Atitlan, one of the most sacred lakes of the Mayan people. Our group was met by 25 members of the 440 elders who had been elected to be the ones to begin the remembering of their knowledge. There are other ways the Mayan remember their knowledge besides using their brains, through the use of the 13 crystal skulls, one for each 1,000 years since Atlantis. In a little bit, we'll talk about this in a little bit. It's an extraordinary subject. The world group sat down in a half circle around the 25 Mayan elders as they began with the Mayan glyph for the number 0. They literally began to decipher this glyph as if they had never seen it before. After about an hour and a half, the Mayans had completed the number 0. And then they went to the glyph for the number 1. We watched them as they went, I think, through 1, 0, and 2, I think, and we got that much in. We spent about a half a day witnessing this event. And then our part was over. The world watched as the Mayans began to recreate their knowledge, and the prophecy was fulfilled. The next morning, the Mayan Council of Elders took us by boat to the far side of Lake Atitlan, to a place where only Mayan ceremony is performed. This was to be a Mayan fire ceremony. The boat ride over these waters, was something that every person there will probably remember for the rest of their life. This towering volcano over this lake, perching on the edge of this lake, left one with this ominous feeling that it would explode at any moment. I mean, it had smoke coming out of it. And no wonder the Mayan did the fire ceremony there. On a remote beach, with the sound of the waves lapping endlessly and the deep blue sky forming the heavens above us, Don Alejandro shaped our diverse group into a circle. And in near silence, after an hour-long preparation with each stage of the fire ceremony carefully and geometrically created, this beautiful arrangement of rocks and herbs and candles and other sacred objects was ready for the fire to give life to the ceremony. This was very unusual. I don't know if the fire ceremony had ever been photographed before, and especially in the way that they did this. They actually let us see as they made the geometrical images on the ground, and they explained what each thing was. As they put in each herb, they told us what it meant. As they laid each candle and each object in there, they described exactly what this meant. This may have never been done before, and according to Don Alejandro, this ceremony had not taken place for 13,000 years. The Hopi, the Kogi Mamos, and the Arhuacos Mamos, and the members of the Mayan Councils of Elders, and Don Alejandro, and our humble group from all over the world, lowered our heads in prayer as the first flames began to reach to the open sky. Though we were from all